Right, I've decided to try things a little bit differently this month. So I'd be really grateful for your feedback, because what I want these sessions to be are really helpful and really conducive for you, that you're going to get something out of it. So I've decided to do it a little bit more structured this month. So we're going to have some topics that we're going to discuss, some pointers that I've picked up on from some of you, where you've given me some feedback already, some questions that are on your mind, some things that I've noticed going on in the sector that might be interesting for us to talk about. But there will still be plenty of opportunity for you to ask any questions, any concerns, anything you've got going on that you want to cover. So here's what we're going to have a look at today. We're going to look at the UK grant makers data. I'd love to know what you think about this. Have you seen it already? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What if a trust doesn't accept unsolicited applications? This is something I get asked all the time, and something we've discussed previously, but I've put together a slide with some notes on it that I thought might be helpful for you. And also another thing we've discussed, and I've had lots of questions about after we've discussed it, is LinkedIn for trust fundraisers, how to use it, how to utilize it, how's the best to get the most out of it. And also I attended the Evesham Trust Meet the Funder last week, and there was some really good feedback there, not necessarily about what the Evesham Trust is looking for, because that will be really dependent on, you know, the backgrounds of your charity and what you're looking for. So I didn't want to make it too tailored to just the Evesham Trust, but it's things that they said that actually resonate wider and that are really useful to know. Some of them are things that we already know as trust fundraisers, but sometimes hearing them from a funder puts them in a slightly different context. And then of course there's opportunities there for you to ask questions, any topics you want support with in the next hour that you've got together. So I also get asked a lot about monetary fundraising and who we are. So just in case you're not familiar with monetary fundraising and our services, I just wanted to give you a quick overview. So for more than 14 years, monetary fundraising has been supporting organisations like yours to secure the income they need to thrive. That's through strategic, donor-focused trust fundraising, major donor fundraising and capital appeals. We work with fundraisers across the UK, delivering training, consultancy and practical support. So if you're interested in finding out more about what we do or how we could support you, there's lots of information on our monetary fundraising website, which is monetaryfundraising.co.uk. And then who am I? Why should you listen to me? I'm Stacey, and I've worked in fundraising for 2 decades, goodness me, and most of that has been in trust fundraising. I've worked in-house, I've led fundraising teams, and now I'm supporting a wide range of charities across the UK with their trust fundraising. My focus is always on practical, relationship-led approaches that really work, especially in how fast our trust fundraising landscape and competitive our trust fundraising landscape is at the moment. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview about monetary fundraising and about who I am. So now I want to hear from all of you. How are you all feeling out there at the minute? Has things calmed down a minute? Last month we were all feeling a bit more positive and a bit more upbeat, so I'm hoping that that's continued. How are you feeling? What are you seeing out there? Have you got any wins, big or small, that you want to celebrate with us? We'd love to be able to celebrate together. It's always nice, isn't it? Ed asks on a bundled deal for our web courses. It's not something that we typically do, but I can ask about that for you, Ed, if you wanted to do more than one of our. We have some on-demand webinars that are instantly downloadable. They're £30 plus VAT each, and they cover a wide range of topics. And I'd love to hear from you. If there's any topics that we don't currently cover, I can definitely put them on my to-do list. If there's anything that you'd want to have a look at or dive a bit deeper in, if you do some of the webinars, I'd love to hear your feedback so that I can make sure that they're hitting the right points for you and you're getting what you need out of them. So please do let me know, and I'll look into that for you, Ed, about bundled deals. I shall write that down. And Ed is feeling very upbeat, which is amazing, and I hope you all are feeling really upbeat too. I'm feeling like things, I mean, not the competitive side, that's still high, but the closures and the pauses feels like they're slowing down a little bit. If anybody's following Joe's The List, there doesn't seem to be as many being added in quite the way that they were before. It was frightening how many were being added at one point earlier this year, but I feel like that's slowed down now. I hope you're all feeling that too. But yeah, it'd be great to hear from you and how you're all feeling. So as you're pondering that, let's move on to the UK grant makers data. So I don't know if you've all had a chance to have a look at this. What I'll do is I will pop the link to this data set in the chat so you can go back to it later, or you can have a look at it now. You can have it both open at the same time. So I've put on the screen some of the main points that came out of it. I'd love to hear how you feel about this, and I'll share my feelings about this as well. So trusts and foundations have overtaken government bodies as the largest source of grant income to the voluntary and community sector. So for me, that just shows how hard it's been for some of us, and I've experienced this in the last year as well, to get those kind of government council-led grants. We had a huge project in the last organisation that I worked in. We were told that wasn't going to be funded by the local council anymore, which then meant we had to look for trusts and foundations to fill that gap for us. And so I think, although it's positive that trusts and foundations, are doing so much out there, and that's positive for the sector, but I do think this is what's kind of leading to the landscape being so competitive, is that some of those government bodies that were giving out those grants are no longer doing that. So then we're having to look for trusts and foundations to try and fill those gaps, which is making it competitive. But there were over 14,000 grant makers who awarded more than 23.5 billion in grants last year. And that's an increase of 7% from the previous year, which is amazing. We can only take that as a positive, really, isn't it? It's a real positive that there is so much going on in the trust and foundations landscape, and so much being given away. And that trusts and foundations gave 8.24 billion, and that's up 12% from the previous year. And no surprising, we know how much the National Lottery is a big player in the sector, and they distributed grants totaling over 2.4 billion. So we look at that and we think, wow, it's really positive in the sector, and it's really good, isn't it? There's lots of things going on, and it is. But I think as trust fundraisers, we look at this and go, this doesn't feel like what I'm seeing and feeling out there. So how do you feel about this data? I'd love to hear your thoughts as well as I give my thoughts. For me, I think that this is a snapshot kind of in our rearview mirror of what was happening last year. And since this information was gathered, we've seen, like I mentioned, and like we know, a lot of closures, a lot of pauses, a lot of things have changed in the trust fundraising landscape. So I think for us as trust fundraisers, it will be what this set of data is like next year. I mean, we'll probably have moved on again. The landscape moves, doesn't it? That's trusts forever perpetually moving. How things will feel different, and what we might get from this data when we look back at it next year. So it's a really, really interesting set of data for us to have. It helps us look at our strategy and try and see what we can do and what we can put in place. Like I said, on the surface of it, it looks really, really positive, doesn't it? But as Delta said, this past 6 months has felt a lot worse and a lot tighter. The competition has been absolutely higher, and maybe that's some of the government bodies, the trusts and foundations taking over from them, is part of the problem. More people are looking for trusts and foundations to support that and fill that gap that would have been able to go for from the local council. I know firsthand had experience of that. So I think it's a really interesting set of data. But when I saw it, I was like, with my trust fundraisers hat on, this is going to look like it's all rosy in my sector. And if my senior leaders or trustees were to see this, they'd be like, look, there's loads of money out there. Why aren't we getting more money and why aren't we going for that? But actually, it is a rear view mirror look, kind of shows where we were rather than where we are, which is really useful to know for building our strategy. But I think as trust fundraisers on the ground probably have a better sense of how everything is at the moment. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the comments. Yeah, core funding is really hard. I think with trusts and foundations that rule out salary costs, I'd really have a look at the wording that they use and whether it's running costs and salary costs or whether it's project costs. Because if it's project costs, that can still include your salary costs. So have a real look at how they word what they don't want to fund. Because if project costs should still include those salary costs, and there are ways that you can talk about salaries as part of your project, which really help demonstrate impact. Without those salaries, you wouldn't be able to afford to do some of that work. And so you should be looking at how to weave in those salary costs into your project costs. It really is doable. It just means you're looking at things a little bit differently. So I definitely have a look and see whether its salary costs are ruled out completely because they don't support running costs or core costs, or whether they do support project costs and perhaps salaries can be included in that and worked into the costs of the project rather than looking at them separately. Ed says what this highlights is the disconnect and disparity between those charities who can subscribe to 500 plus databases and those that can't. If you don't know who to apply to, then it's very hard to get money. And I think also it's those smaller charities, isn't it, where you're doing this completely on your own, and you're having to do the prospecting, you're having to do the applying, you're having to do the stewardship, and you probably wear more than one fundraising hat. Trust fundraising probably isn't your sole reason for being. You're probably doing corporates, community, events, all sorts of things under that as well. I do think some of those larger charities are struggling in terms of knowing who, finding those to apply to, because we've had so many closures. But I think it's even harder for smaller organisations where they don't have the staff time to put in to find those grant makers, to fill those gaps where we've lost some of those bigger players in the sector. So yeah, it's really difficult. And I think it's about senior leadership and your trustees giving you the time. If they want funding from trusts and foundations, it's about giving you the time to be able to do that work and to find those trusts. You don't have to subscribe. There's lots of free. If anybody uses the Charity Excellence Framework, which is completely free, that's a really good way of looking for trusts and foundations. And also the Charity Commission website itself, or the OSCR if you're in Scotland. You can filter that and you can find trusts and foundations to apply to that are grant makers that way. So it's all labour intensive, absolutely, but trust fundraising it's finding the right funder and making sure their priorities really match your project before applying to them. So it's labour intensive, isn't it? But there are things you can do. And Liz has said, have you tried the Grin bulletins? A lot cheaper and very good. Absolutely, we use Grin at Money Tree Fundraising, and it's really, really good. Rebecca says it would be interested to know how much was applied for by charities in comparison to how much was awarded. Like to be able to know what, but then might show just how competitive things are. And I also wish funders would kind of make that clear at the point of application as well, what their success rate is, so you as trust fundraisers can go, Is this worth me applying to? Is it worth my precious time? Are we a really good fit? Are we a mid fit? And it's a quick turnaround and I might get, a 10% chance of success, or it might be a 50% chance of success. So it's worth me going for. I've noticed some funders have started doing this, which is really good. I think what was I looking at the other day? The February Foundation had put on their success rates, which I thought was a really good, really transparent move to be able to put that on, so you could make a really informed choice as a trust fundraiser whether you wanted to apply to that or not, depending on how good a fit you were, and whether it was worth your time, whether you had ones that were a better fit. Yep, I agree. Ed has just said, playing devil's advocate, have we had so many closures? 100 to 200 out of 14,000 is a drop in the ocean. Absolutely. It's less than 5% of all the trusts and foundations that are out there, but it's some of the big players. I think that's what the knock-on effect has been, is that some of those big players have changed what they're doing and now only going for charities that they found themselves. We've seen a lot more move to that. If they haven't closed completely, they've closed to receiving applications, and we'll talk about unsolicited applications in a minute. But I think it's that, it's that knock-on effect, isn't it? And that puts the pressure on some of those smaller funders out there who've now seen a deluge of us trust fundraisers then applying to them, which kind of kicks the problem down the line. So they're seeing a lot more applications, and then with the government bodies and local council not giving out as much in funds either, then that's making it more competitive out there. And I think us as trust fundraisers are really good at what we do, and we're good at finding these places to apply to. So even some of the smaller trusts that didn't get so many applications are now being discovered and now being able to apply to. And it's like Del says, she's finding they're finding the bigger foundations have closed, and this has led to a bigger squeeze on those trusts giving out £5,000. And I agree that we'll see that squeeze down. So it's those £5,000 to £10,000 kind of middle ones that are really feeling the squeeze, because £5,000 to £10,000 for an organisation is a lot of money and could do a lot of good, particularly if you're a smaller organisation. So we're all trying to apply for those because those could make a really big difference, because we can't go for some of those bigger ones like Del says. So then we're finding that squeeze in the middle is putting a lot of pressure on some of those smaller ones where they give out kind of the middle of the road ones. Lots of praise for charity excellence, which is fantastic. It's a really good thing to use if you're short on funds to be able to invest into prospecting and research. I definitely recommend having a look at those and using the Charity Commission website. It's a real wealth of information. You get their accounts, you can get their information, their contact information from there. Not everyone has a website, so being able to go on and have a read through their accounts is really, really important. And you get lots of information, usually, from there. So fantastic. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts on the grant makers data. I agree with a lot of what you're saying in the chat and that we've just talked about. The closures are a drop in the ocean, like I said, less than 5%, but that 5% can really have a knock-on effect to how competitive it is out there. Some of the bigger ones that are closing or pausing or looking to find their own charity support then have that squeeze, like we were saying, on those £5,000 to £10,000 givers in the middle, and some of those smaller trusts who just can't cope with the amount of applications that they're receiving. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this last 6 months of this year and early into 2026, as then those trusts are feeling maybe what some of the bigger trusts have been feeling and have made these decisions. I think it would be good if trusts and foundations were really clear about what they wanted to support and didn't make it so hard for us to find what it is that they want to support. Sometimes you really have to search in their accounts to find, on the surface they're a general grant maker, and then you're looking and go, oh, it's just animal welfare or it's just health that they support. But why aren't they more, upfront with these things and upfront with their success rates? I think that would be really helpful for us as trust fundraisers if we can see what the success rates were, because then we could make an educated guess as much as we can on whether it's worth investing our time into that particular funder. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that UK Grantmaker data. I'm always open to your thoughts and ideas. If you want to come over and follow me on LinkedIn, we talk about a lot of these things on there, and I post a lot of these things before we come to the lives as soon as they're released. So you're always welcome to come over and join the chat there. So one of the biggest things I get asked about is, what if a trust doesn't accept applications? And it's really frustrating, and I've seen more and more trusts going down this route to try and cope with that rise in demand that they've seen. They've chosen to take a step back and be more proactive in them looking for those opportunities for themselves. So it doesn't have to mean that it's a closed door. There are things that you can do and your organizations can do to try and highlight who you are and get around the fact that they don't accept unsolicited applications. So what I've noticed more and more is those that don't accept applications, they often do accept an expression of interest. So an expression of interest is just a short, impactful summary of your work, your project idea, the beneficiaries, the difference you're trying to make. It's not a full proposal, it's just a nudge that kind of says, look, we're here, we're doing this, we think we really fit. Obviously, only submit that if they say that they accept applications. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I emailed them because we're a really good fit, and they said they don't accept applications, but perhaps will be the difference to the rule. Actually, what you're probably doing there is cutting yourself off even more. If a trust says they don't want to hear from you, then don't go up to them and say, here's the information, in the hopes that you might be different. They are proactively looking for charities that they want to support, so you might end up doing more harm than good. But if they say they accept an expression of interest and you're a really good fit for their priorities, there is no reason why you couldn't submit that. And the key is clarity and conciseness with your expression of interest. Show the heart of your project and the potential impact of their support. It's one side of A4 or less. So if they really, really don't accept applications, no expression of interest, this is where the visibility and positioning of your organisation really becomes important. You need to work on raising your profile so trust can find you. So there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can attend events or funder briefings where they might be speaking. So Meet the Funder events are a brilliant way of getting in front of some of the trusts that you want to apply to. Your name in the chat, asking a really thoughtful question in that shared space, just gets you on their radar and starts them linking you, your charity, with the work that you're doing and things that they might be interested in. You'll be surprised at how much attention they pay to the kind of charities that are in the chat, that they might then want to go on and do a bit more research on. And when they're doing that research, you need to make sure that your website and social media is up to date. Not only showing the impact of your work, but also the need. Sometimes as charities, we're not very good at putting our need out there. So you might see all this amazing thing about, here's the impact of our work. And a funder might look at that and go, oh, well, then they've got lots of money. They're doing lots of amazing things, so they might not need us. So it's important that you also talk about the need and what you could do with funding. Gemma's just asked, who organises, how do you find out about Meet the Funder events? If you follow me on LinkedIn, I try and post Meet the Funder events on a monthly basis, so you can plan for the next couple of months. But also Eventbrite is a great way of finding Meet the Funder events. If you follow funders that you are interested in, sign up to their websites and newsletters. They often put out if they're doing Meet the Funder events, and then places like Get Grants, Fundraising Everywhere, they often organise some Meet the Funder events, so it's good to follow them as well so you can see when things are coming up. But I try and do a roundup every month on LinkedIn, so you can see what's out there. So when we're updating our websites and our social media, if you have a particular funder in mind, make sure that you're using key phrases and values that mirror their own language. So if there's something and they talk about, maybe it's health, maybe they talk about supporting health organizations in a particular way, use those phrases, use that language in your own social media posts. So if they're doing website searches, if they're doing internet searches, then your mirroring of their language, if that's what they're searching for, will pop up for them to see. Those are the things that they really care about. So those are the things that they'll be searching for when they're looking for charities that fit there as well. If they're looking for organisations, you'll pop up on their radar, and that's the point with a charity, with a funder that doesn't accept unsolicited applications. You're trying to get on their radar. So also look at sector awards, not just charity awards. If you're doing something really great in the homeless sector, say, are there any awards that you can go for in that sector? If you're doing amazing things in health, amazing things in animal welfare, are there awards that you could go for that help raise your profile? Are there panels that you can speak on, or someone in your organisation can speak in about your particular specific specialism, that again gets you on a funder's radar? If you're doing great things, if you're winning awards, then funders will naturally see you because they're working in the same space. And also some sector groups. Are there some working groups that are trying to tackle the problem that your charity is looking at and is trying to support, that you can be a part of, so you can be that voice? And again, that might get you in front of some funders. It's giving your work credibility and visibility beyond those direct funder channels. It's getting you out into the wider sector. That's not the charity sector, that it's your specific area of specialism, that the trust funder might be moving in and be able to see you, and you'll be more visible. It signals to trust that your work's valued and impactful, and that's what they really want to support, work that's really impactful. And you will hear it all the time, but your trustee connections, you never know who they might know and who they might have in their little black book that they can introduce you to. It's particularly if you're a small local charity that has some small local funders, your community foundations and things like that can really help you. There are really good places to go to and see if your trustees know any of them. Get your top 10 and get the trustees for your top 10, and when you next have a trustee board, or if you don't go into the trustee boards, get your senior managers or your senior leadership team to take those lists in and see who they know. Don't overwhelm them with lots and lots. So I'd only take in your top 10, maybe your top 5 to start with, and then you can start exploring those connections. But also look at your volunteers. Who do your volunteers know? You'll be surprised at who volunteers know. You know, lots of volunteers come into the charity sector, they've had a fantastic background, and then they have a really well-connected background. So they still are plugged in, and they might know some really good people that are sat on some really good boards for trust funders. Look at your ambassadors. Who do you know that could open doors that way? And also your major donors. Your major donors quite often move in the circles where they might know some trust funders. Thank you, Del, for sharing about the Ludlow. Yes, that is a really good one coming up. I've had lots of questions about Ludlow funding portal, because now it looks after 400 plus trust funders. So and I've heard mixed things about people being supported. I was on something yesterday, and one person said they've had nothing since moving to the portal, and had previous success with Ludlow, and then another person said they had no success before the portal and now have had lots of success. So it seems a really mixed bag out there. I have to say my experience with the portal is quite mixed as well. So I think that would be a really, really good Meet the Funder to go on. So I definitely recommend that, and that's actually going to be in my roundup on LinkedIn of Meet the Funders for next month. But Dell's also said that finding out who your deputy lieutenants are and inviting them to become patrons has worked really well. Again, deputy lieutenants, high sheriffs, they change every year. Deputy lieutenants, not quite so much. And Lord lieutenants, they are really good to get in with as well if you've got any, especially if you're a local charity. Finding out who your high sheriff is. They usually change yearly, but you can usually find out who they're going to be up to 2 years before, so you can start building that relationship with them even before they become high sheriff. Liz says, I wish the Ludlow portal would show whether your application has been seen and reviewed by someone. I've signed up to the event to try and find out more. I absolutely agree, Liz, because otherwise it's just out there in the ether, isn't it? And you've no idea whether it's been looked at. I tend to go back into mine kind of every 6 months and refresh it or put a refreshed version in. I've always got kind of a general application out there, and that's, I will go in and refresh those, but I will also then apply to specific trust through the portal as well. So I'm coming at it all sides to cover all bases. But yeah, it'd be really helpful, wouldn't it, if they say whether they'd at least been looked at and reviewed by someone, so you don't, then just not out there doing nothing. Alison says, look at your local Rotary clubs too. Rotaries, Lions, Women's Institute, although they don't tend to give out money themselves, but they are really, really well connected, as are your Lions, as are your Rotaries. Look at your local Masons as well. They often give out local grants. Masons do as well. Gemma says, on the Ludlow Trust, does anyone know how to find out the list of trusts that they look after on a Charity Commission search? Sorry, just skip there, to do some initial research to see if there are any way. So you can get a short list if you go into a trust that is administered by the Ludlow Trust. If you go into the trustee section, it will bring up a short list there, so you can start by having a look at that. But I think someone else says, Liz says, I'm sure someone did a postcode search and came up with a list, and I think you can do it with a postcode search, or you can do it by searching under Ludlow as well. Jessica says, we've had some really good success with Ludlow, but the issue I find is that you can only really look at it as a one-off funder, and there's absolutely no way of making contacts with the trustees. I've contacted Ludlow directly about this, particularly for a funder who gave us 15k out of the blue. So I've had a different experience to that. We had funding for a charity I was working with, and we were contacted directly by the trust themselves to let us know that we were successful, so we could build a relationship, although we still had to reapply through the portal, which was a bit of a pain, because like we were saying, you're never sure whether they really look at it, have they seen it, have they got it, but we could build that relationship with the funder, and we could send them the update reports and things like that we normally would do. So again, that just shows me that there's a lot of variation with how things are done through the portal, and I guess it depends on the trust themselves and how involved that trust is. We must have just really lucked out with a trust who still wanted to be quite involved, even though they were administered through Ludlow. So I think that's tricky. It just shows to me that disparity that's there. Liz says, are they duty bound to forward communications from you to trusts? Maybe that's a question we can ask on the Meet the Funder. I think it's a good thing to bring up with them, because we as trust fundraisers want to try and build that relationship, and if we're not able to, that's a real hindrance, and it's a shame for those trusts if they never see the impact of their funding because they don't get what they need. Does anyone know if there are any other portals, Daisy asks, like Ludlow, that you can just upload applications to be viewed by lots of trusts? I don't, Daisy. And looking at how the Ludlow portal works, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing that there aren't any others that you can do that with. Because like we're saying, there's a lot of mixed chat about Ludlow. Maybe this is something we can talk about next month after we've been to the Meet the Funder. Maybe we can pick up some of these things there. I'll add it to the list for next month. Jessica says, yes, they do forward on all reports, but always like to make a personal connection, pick up the telephone, have a face-to-face meeting. So I find I can't do the in-depth stewardship that I'm used to, and will often lead to repeat grants. Completely agree, Jessica. And I guess from the trust's point of view, that although that means they're missing out on some of the good stewardship that we all know we can give as trust fundraisers, they're doing it through Ludlow because they're short on time. They might be a small trust, so they're trying to cut out that wealth of paperwork that comes with it. So it swings and roundabouts for them, isn't it, I suppose? Or when Liz has said that there was someone on the Trust Fundraising Hub Facebook group that managed to compile a list. I'll have a look, see if I can do it. And if I can do it, I'll share it on LinkedIn. See if I can pull off a list. Fantastic. Oh, Del, I'm so glad that you've been able to join us for the first time and that you're finding it useful. That's so lovely of you. This is what this is all about. We're all here to help each other. It's really important, particularly when it's really competitive, to not lose sight on that, ultimately we're here to help those beneficiaries, and we need to be able to come together to do that. Okay, let's have a look at LinkedIn for trust fundraisers. So this is something that we've talked about in previous lives as one of the ways that you can make yourself and your charity really visible. Trusts and foundations themselves are getting more visible on LinkedIn, particularly those that have a wider staff team. So some of those bigger ones, Lloyd's, they're on there and they put quite a bit on there. Who's the other one I was thinking of? Completely got out of my head, but there are some good ones on there. There are 7 top tips that I've pulled together to help you when you're thinking about using LinkedIn. So the biggest thing Garfield Weston, that's it, Louise, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. That's exactly who I was thinking of. They've put loads of good things out there. Greg's, they put loads of things out there as well. Co-op, he's the other one. See, now I'm going down the thing of trying to think of loads of trusts, and now my mind's gone blank. But there are loads, is what I'm trying to demonstrate there. There are lots of trust fundraisers who are now using LinkedIn. So if I can advise you of anything to do after you've had your lunch after this session, if you haven't already got one, go and set up a LinkedIn profile, because it will come in real handy to be able to have that. It'd mean you can make connections, you can follow some of the trust fundraisers, you can start to interact with them. It honestly will be really helpful for you. So if you have your LinkedIn profile, you need to try and optimize it. So use your own profile's headline. Yeah, both. I mean both, Gemma. So because you can be in control of what you do right after this session. If you don't have a personal profile, go and set that up now, because you can use that on a personal level to try and build those relationships, follow people and what's going on in the sector. But you should also have an organisational charity profile as well. But I understand that that's harder for maybe some of you to do, because that might not be in your gift to be able to do that for your organisation. But it's definitely something you should be having a chat with your organisation to get them on LinkedIn if they're not already on there. But my advice to you right now after this session is, if you haven't got a personal LinkedIn profile, go and set one of those up. So use your profile headline to highlight your purpose and include your cause. So you don't necessarily even have to name your charity, but even just to put in there, driving meaningful change for people suffering from homelessness or health issues or disability or cancer. Just put something in there that sparks an interest. And if someone's quickly looking at your profile, they can see exactly what it is that you're trying to do. It doesn't have to be your charity name. It can be something that just sparks that interest related to your cause. Add a featured section that highlights something from your organisation, or if your organisation isn't yet on LinkedIn, something that you can upload. So your impact report, a case study, a success story that you can then constantly change and evolve and refresh over time. But again, if a funder was looking at your profile, they can see exactly what it is that you're trying to do in your role and exactly what your organisation impact, a really good case study or a success story right in their face, pinned at the top of your page. Make sure your about section shows your passion for the cause. So I think LinkedIn traditionally has been used as kind of your online CV, and so it can get very kind of, and I do paperwork and I do this, I submit things to trust, but actually what we need to do now is try and start making it so it's a tool for us to use to interact with those funders. So make sure that your about section demonstrates that passion for your cause and why you're doing what you're doing. So that can be impact based, that can be beneficiary based, but just highlight what it is rather than just I do a trust fundraising. So make it more. So then you can start to engage with funders really gently. This isn't about pitching. This is about building familiarity. So following funders, following trusts, following the staff of those trusts on LinkedIn, send them a little message saying, I really enjoyed what you were saying about ABC. I'd love to follow you to find out more. I'd love to connect to find out more. I really enjoyed the fact that you've been supporting this type of foundations. We do really similar work and I'd love to follow you. I'd love to connect with you to find out more. So really gentle. You're not saying, hi, I'm such and such charity and I want you to give us money. This is about just making yourself visible. This is what this is all about. I got a question last time about, they were worried that if they were on LinkedIn that they'd just be connecting with their peers and not having some of those interactions with funders that they want. And even connecting with your peers is really, really good. You never know who your peers are connected to. So you might go from, being a third or fourth connection where you can't connect direct to a staff member of a fund and someone else is already connected with that, so it lifts you up to be your second or first connections where you can connect, you can send those messages, you can start interacting with them. So even you might think, oh, I'm just connected with loads of trust fundraisers. That can still be really, really beneficial. And actually by connecting with those people in our sector, we can build those relationships that we're seeing in the chat here. We can help and support each other. So it's never a bad thing. But just remember that you can also reach out to those funders, follow those funders on LinkedIn, follow the trust that you see. It's really good to be able to get that information up front. I'm seeing more and more funders put on when they're closing, when there are new applications coming out, new streams that are being launched, projects that they've supported, case studies that they're putting out there as well, which gives you a really good idea of what's going on out there. Shout about your impact. So again, just like you would do on your Facebook, on your link, on your Instagram, shout about the impact your charity is having. So this is you as a trust fundraiser, maybe sharing the impact reports that your charity is putting out there, but also your charity. So that's why having a charity profile is really, really essential, because you can then share things that they're putting out there as well. So you're showing that connection, you're showing that impact. Be proud of it when you're sharing it, really, when you're highlighting it, be really proud of what they're doing. And that gives you a really good chance for you to then reflect some of that funder language in your LinkedIn post. That's a really good way of doing it. You're sharing your charity's impact using that funder language of a funder that you've identified you want to apply to, but doesn't accept unsolicited applications. So that's a really good, gentle way that you can do that. And share what you're learning about your charity. Share what you are finding out. Are there some key stats, some key impact stats that your charity is putting out there, and that's helping you learn and grow your knowledge? So then funders might be able to find that too. Again, share in your own words, in your own profile, what that has helped you learn about your work and what that's helping you do in your work. Share your reflections, because that's what LinkedIn is all about. It's your opinion, your reflections, and that's what gets the interactions. And again, show alignment. This is about reflecting that funder language back to them when you're sharing your posts, when your charity is putting those posts out there, just the same as you would do on what I would call traditional social media. So again, we talked about connecting with peers and sector voices. UK fundraising are on their directory of fundraising everywhere. They're all on LinkedIn, and they all put out really good content to help you see what's going on in the trust fundraising landscape. So even if you do nothing else, you're not sure yet about connecting with funders, you're not sure yet about how to use LinkedIn in that way, test the waters by connecting with your peers, people that are on the chat here today, and connecting with sector voices, so you can at least see what's happening in the sector, and then go from there. Dip your toe in the water that way. And then if you're a small team or just starting out, create lightweight content. Posting once a week is enough to get you started. Use carousels, use polls, use questions, reshare things that you're seeing out there with your own thoughts and reflections around it. Canva is really good. Canva do a free version that you can use for charities. They have some really good templates, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. AI, you can help you to start crafting some things to put out there on LinkedIn to just help you test the water. The better you are at feeding things into AI, the better it will come back out to you as, but it will at least give you a baseline to start building your thoughts and add in your own reflections and thoughts around it. It's just a good way to test the water. I wouldn't rely on AI, but if you've never done this kind of thing before and want a baseline to start with, it's definitely a thing to have a look at. So that's a whistle-stop tour of LinkedIn, but I hope you found that really useful. It's a really good tool, and it's going to be used more and more trusts and foundations and funders are starting to use it themselves. So get in there early and start using it as well. And then the Evesham Trust. So these are just things that I picked up from the Meet the Funder I went to last week. And I thought they were really interesting things because they're things that we've discussed here. There are things that we hear as trust funders all the time, but sometimes hearing it back from a funder is really interesting, I think. Maybe, I don't know. So funders, do check your website and social media when you make an application. And the big thing that the Evesham Trust said was a lot of applications they received, the corresponding charities did not talk about the work that they do on their website or social media. So as far as they were concerned, the charity didn't do anything. It was a lot about their fundraising, a lot about volunteers, all good stuff. But if you're not talking about the impact of your work, what work you're doing, if a funder looks at you, they might assume that you're not doing anything, particularly if you're not linking to your impact reports or your annual reviews. I'm glad Ed found the Meet the Funder helpful as well. So they also said, be really clear. Why are you best placed to solve this problem? She said that there's lots of national charities out there doing very similar things. So why would you, as a small organisation, be the best bet for their money? That could be because you're closer to what's going on the ground. You're involving your beneficiaries in the design of your project. You're getting that feedback. You're using that. So be really clear about why it should be you. Show clearly the problem and the issue that you want to solve. Some of the applications they received were quite woolly around this and didn't use evidence, which is point 4, to show that they knew what the problem was and they knew how to solve it and why they were best placed. All fits together. Show how the project fits with your overall mission and vision. Sometimes this can get lost because our project feels like a very different thing to the overall vision and mission of our organisation. But that was something that the Evesham Trust said that they looked at. And that they would go back to that to see how that project would feed back into that. So if you can make that easy for them by highlighting it and demonstrating it, that really would work. If your reserves are high, explain why, and be really upfront. So don't assume that, one, they're not going to look at your accounts, because they will. They'll go on the Charity Commission and have a look at your accounts, and they will wonder why you weren't upfront about why your reserves are high. And sometimes it's just that you've had a really great legacy gift given to you, and that you haven't decided what to do with it yet. It could be you've had a really great one-off gift and that's been designated into a project or has been given to you for a particular project. So be really upfront about why your reserves are high. And again, what's your designated reserves? That was another thing that they highlighted. There was that some charities, they saw lots of designated reserves and then they were being asked for more money. So have a look at those. And have a chat with your accountant, your finance team, and really understand why so much has been designated and what's it's been designated for, and be upfront about why that decision has been made. Include full budgets which match your application on your project. So again, check back and make sure everything makes sense. They do that. They said that they would go through and add everything up and look through the application to make sure everything made financial sense. So that's something we should be doing as trust fundraisers too. They said show your marketing and fundraising costs. Now this might be something that is just key for the Evesham Trust. It's not something I've heard that is an absolute must for other trusts, but I thought that was interesting that they wanted to see the marketing and fundraising costs included in the budgets. So something to think about there. Make sure your safeguarding policy is really easy to find. Make sure that it's on your website so they can find it. Link it in your application so they know where it is. Have it in your header on your charity letterhead, so that everybody knows where it is and they don't have to go searching for it. And if they email you to ask for more information, make it a priority that you go back to them as soon as possible. She said that the amount of people that sat on that email for quite a while when they were asking for that information because they had a trustee meeting imminent was ridiculous. So she said if they're asking you for more information, they need it fairly soon so they can get it ready for their next meeting. So I thought that was a good, important point for us to remember, because it can get very busy and sometimes we're waiting on information from other people before we can respond, but we need to really kind of make that a priority. So we've got 5 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions, any thoughts of anything that we've heard today, I'd be really happy to answer anything or go over anything. I hope you've enjoyed kind of this new way of doing these lives, and that you've found that a bit more informative and helpful than kind of making it an open forum. I still really want it to be an open forum for you to ask me questions or go over anything. So if you've got any topics you want to go over next month, which will be, let me just have a quick look, on Tuesday the 29th of July will be the next one. Same time, 12 noon, absolutely free to join us again. Please either drop me a note through LinkedIn or send me an email. You should all have my email address from registering for today. Any topics, any questions that you'd like to go over next month, do let me know. Otherwise, I've scribbled a couple of things down like Ludlow, so we can have a proper chat about Ludlow next month. But otherwise, it's been really great for you all to join me. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you've all found it useful. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. That just gives me a really good steer about how to move forward. And lots of people that you have attended for the first time. So I'm so glad that you've found us and that you'll come along next month. Those should be monthly. We'll take a pause in August, give you all a break. So hopefully you can get a chance to go off on a lovely summer holiday. And we usually pause in December as well, because you're all too busy enjoying Christmas festivities to come to a live chat with us. But apart from that, we'll do them monthly. So like I said, next one is on the 29th. Let me quickly, I can drop actually, before you all go, I can drop, that's the link to sign up for next month as well. But it's all on our Tree Fundraising website as well if you want to sign up for next month. So I'd look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Any questions you've got outside, please do drop me a note. I'd love to hear from you all. Any feedback that you've got, any topics you'd want us to cover next month or in any of the on-demands that we've got going on. That would be great to hear from you as well. So thank you so much, everyone. You can all go and enjoy your lunch, hopefully outside if it's not raining. It's supposed to get hot again by the end of the week, isn't it? I don't know if I feel that's a good thing or a bad thing. I can take 25, 26 would be lovely. 30, not quite so much for me. But I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon. Take care. Bye.